All right. Continuing on with the interview of Liza Henriksen for Ask a Montessorian. Thank you guys for joining us again. You told us about your Montessori training, and she's currently in the 12 to 18 training, which is so awesome and exciting, and that is through
Train Montessori.
Train Montessori in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell me about, you kind of got into it a little bit, but tell me more about your actual teaching experience.
Okay, so I started teaching back in I believe it was either 93 or 94. I think it was once I got done with my fashion design degree, but it might have been the summer before that I taught the Sunbeam class for my church, which is the 3-year-olds. And they were so sweet, and including in that class was a little boy in a wheelchair. I fell in love with it, right? And from there I taught at different preschools, either doing 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and eventually for, I think it was 2 years, I settled into teaching elementary age kids, and I loved it. In Colorado, they had, because the schools were overcrowded, they had a track system. So every 3 weeks, a group would be off track and not going to school. And so I did the enrichment program and taught them Spanish and music. And we even had shops that we would create, and we entered writing contests, and it was a lot of fun. And this was before I was trained anything. I just found I loved to teach. And so then when I got divorced, I decided, well, I should actually get a teaching degree. So in 2004, I got my elementary education degree. It was emphasis in literacy instruction. And during my student teaching, I was approached by a parent to start a school in the area. They had a Montessori school in the area that was public that my son was going to, but there wasn't other options for preschool or after school care for the other schools. And so I started out with twins that were in my kindergarten class when I was student teaching, and they were going to repeat kindergarten. One of them had CP. And then I had another boy with autism who was starting kindergarten, and then I had a school member's child, and then pretty soon by the end of the year, I had teachers, children, and I had 20 kids. It was just me. And I was trying to do it Montessori inspired. I had even won a bilingual curriculum, believe it or not, with all these bilingual books. Like, I felt like everything was in line for me to have this neat little preschool in my house. I bought the house in the neighborhood. Great tax deduction, by the way. I had a lot of fun, but I realized in talking to my son's teacher at the Montessori school that really I needed to be properly trained. It was not enough to, read the books and think that I could do it. So it was a Montessomething school. And so that was when I did, took that leap of faith to go to Milwaukee. I got a job at a school there in Milwaukee. It was a public charter Montessori. My kids also went to that school, and they were luckily very nice, and I didn't have to do very many hours, and could give lessons when I felt like it and stuff. But I learned a lot from that school, just being associated with that school as a parent and participating in all their parent eds and just watching them build the school from the ground up. So then when I went to Milwaukee, when I left Milwaukee and graduated, I went to a trilingual Montessori school in Switzerland. And I definitely would do a lot of things different now. I feel like you come out of training and you have this really rigid idea of what things should look like and how things should be. And then after a while you realize reality is more than just a theory paper and you have to make it come alive, right? But that year was the year that my son was diagnosed with autism. It was not working out for him in elementary or primary. He actually was doing pretty decent in elementary. And my one regret was I wish I had stayed there, because I think it would have been better for him. But in the end, another school, and this is, beware, once you're Montessori trained, everyone gives you job offers and massages your ego, and you want to make sure that you're with a good school and not just someone trying to rip you off for pretending to be Montessori, and then you're not happy because it's not a real Montessori school. But anyway, yeah, I got lured the second year in Switzerland to a different school that ended up paying me a lower salary. But then I had lower hours, made all these promises they couldn't keep. Long story short, the school ended up going out of business. And after that, I thought, okay, so, you know, it was just better to go back to the States to be with my sons. It was good for my oldest son to be in the public school system. He became fluent in German when we were in Switzerland, but my younger one had to be in a Montessori school in Mexico with his dad. So anyway, I just was going to go back to Colorado, where I'm from, had the contract. I was going to sign for a bilingual school in Denver. And then I had a boyfriend who wanted to go to Arizona, so, and that's where you and I met, at that public school in Arizona, and worked there for a year. That school district was having all kinds of layoffs and things, and I wasn't sure I was going to have a job. I got lured into another Montessori school that ended up running out of money to pay my salary mid-year. They still owe me, technically they owe me $6,000, but I settled for $2,000 later on. Anyway, bless their hearts. I still love everybody involved. It's just hard when, you know, I don't know. You have to have a balance with Montessori, of being Montessori, being faithful to what the parents' needs are, what the family's needs are, you know, so that you can have a growing program, you know. And but then I subbed for 6 months because I had no, you know, basically the last day of school I was called into the office and, oh, we don't have any money for your salary. So anyway, bye. So the only choice I had was to sub, but I'm glad for that. You know, I subbed at middle school, high school, I taught Spanish, I taught math, I worked at Montessori programs too, and I ended up picking, I chose a long-term sub position at a public Montessori school for Mesa School District, and in the end, I had multiple job offers that I had to choose from, but long story short, I ended up working there for a year. Then I worked at a Scottsdale public charter for a year, and anyway, I've experienced probably almost all the Montessori schools in the valley.
Now, what was the Scottsdale public charter?
Oh, that was Mission Montessori.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Okay.
So I was over there. Actually, they hired me for the summer. Then they said, oh, we don't want your son at our school because he has autism, you know. Well, it was because of his behaviors related to autism. So then I decided to go to the public school. I learned, though, like now I keep things separate. I don't try to work at the same school that my child goes to, although eventually Joey is going to work at my school because my school is awesome. But he's going to an awesome school, so we're keeping it separate. But a lot of these places, I was only there for a year because they just weren't accommodating. They weren't inclusive for my son, and that was a challenge. And then I finally just said, look, you go to the public school, I go do my Montessori thing, and then I was able to really grow, you know. Both
Right.
of us really grew, so.
And
yeah.
so Joey is her little man, her youngest, who's 10 years old.
No,
he's 8.
He's 8. He'll turn 9 in June. He's
I
almost
was thinking
9.
it's the same. Yeah, he's almost 9, and he goes to Meyer Montessori, and it's part of Tempe
Elementary School District.
Right, and it's like 8 minutes away from her house. Mm-hmm. And how many Montessori schools does Tempe Elementary School District have right now?
They just have the one.
Just one. Okay.
That's it. Now Mesa, they have like 4, but they're not the same. They're like a few Montessori classrooms within a regular public school. Now they have included, I've heard, like 3 and 4-year-olds to it, so that you have more options.
Interesting. Okay,
So,
well, ask
yeah.
us if you want to know more about all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
a lot of great public school options in the Phoenix area.
Yeah.
And
East
even the
Valley.
private school that I currently work at, they have a lot of scholarship options too. So,
That's awesome.
you know, there's many different. Arizona makes it really easy to find a school that you like.
Yeah, they do. So, that you kind of already answered this a little bit, but tell me why you chose Montessori.
So I had first heard about Montessori on a road trip with my mom and my neighbor. And she'd been working as an assistant and just talking about these amazing things that the kids could do when given independence. And that was my first little bug, right? And I actually wrote about this, and I should share it with you, maybe post it on your blog or whatever. But there's 3 key experiences that really helped me as a teacher and kind of led me to Montessori. So the first one was when my oldest son, who's now 25, when he was 2 and 3, I worked at this preschool. And this preschool was very rigid, very structured, very disciplined. And here my older son would bite kids, for example, And I'm a new mom, right? I don't know what to do. They're like, well, you need to spank them more. I'm like, well, okay,
He's just trying to communicate.
Well, that didn't work, Then they're like, well, give him hot sauce. So I give him hot sauce, and he's like, yum. I mean, you can imagine, this is what happens when you bite and you give him hot sauce, and he's like, yum.
Oh my God.
So I finally settled on mint extract because I knew he didn't particularly like mint. To this day, he can't do mint. I'm like, I'm sorry, I traumatized him for life.
And he was just trying to express himself. That's all it was.
And so it got to the point where they had sent me to a parenting class. They said, we're going to teach you how to be a good parent because you're obviously a bad parent because you can't control your biting child, which was not even in my classroom. This is someone else's classroom, but it was next door, which every time the door opened, he would cry for me, he was kind of a mama's boy. But, so anyway, took this parenting class. They're like, you can take notes and share with everybody. I'm like, okay, great. It was a $200 parenting class, so I was happy. I like continuing ed, So I take the class and take notes, and she's like, and I base this class on Jesus Christ and Gandhi and nonviolent principles and everything. So I'm telling this, the next week, and they're listening, but they're kind of like, Then the next week, she talks about setting things up for kids to choose chores and using a neutral voice when you offer choices and all these amazing things that I've used as a Montessori teacher too. I mean, amazing. I actually teach this at ASU in my special ed class. Well, I don't teach it anymore, but I was for a few years until I couldn't do everything I was doing. But communicating with children, communicating with parents, that's what this class got into. And so within 2 or 3 weeks, Joey's doing chores. He's choosing to do chores. If he doesn't do chores, then he just doesn't have this other little thing. It's a natural consequence setup that this parenting class had. By the 3rd week, they didn't want me to share the notes anymore.
The school? The
the preschool. And honestly, by the time I was done, I think it was a 6-week class, I had realized that I had sort of evolved from this, I didn't like rewards and punishments the way they did things at this school. I loved my kids. I loved giving lessons. I loved being creative and stuff.
Alfie Kohn, Punished by Rewards.
Yeah, that's a good book. Yes, I love that book. And anything else by Alfie Kohn. Oh man, there's so many good resources out there. Also, Green, Lost at School. That's another really, really good one if you for so many reasons. Kids do well when they can. Just remember that. He even appeared at a Montessori event for AMI, so he's maybe not official canon, but his stuff is really good. Anyway, so yeah, I quit that school, and that set me on the road to choosing Montessori, right, and choosing what I did. But I still had another experience in dealing with test scores that kind of also made me stronger as a teacher, and I think, did I tell you this story about the long division with the stamp game? I don't know if I told you this.
I don't think so.
This is when I was at Mesa, and this was at Barbara Bush Elementary, and that place is the most institutional looking thing. They've moved the Montessori program from, I I can't remember the name of it, but they had gardens, they had animals, they had everything that looks like a Montessori, but they decided to move it to Barber Bush, and that place just lockers. The kids have to walk with their hands behind their back, and the principal will make them rewalk if they they did add some gardens off to the side. I've heard it's better. But anyway, you know, the teacher was, the principal was not Montessori trained, and he came with us to the AMS conference and was often shaking his head after particular courses, saying, that doesn't make sense. I don't think this works.
Because he didn't have training.
Yeah, he didn't have
the
training.
Foundation.
Right?
Of course it doesn't make sense if you don't have the foundation.
So I had inherited this amazing class from this amazing teacher who was really good at math. And these kids were doing like math, they were doing upper L math works in lower L. And it was kind of an interesting class because it was 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. It was kind of like, all the leftovers that, you know. So I had a lot of smart kids with behavior problems. I think 7 of them had IEPs.
Toys.
It was. I loved it though. Like, you know, all of those kids, you know. I felt bad for the 4th graders because they knew that they hadn't been chosen to be with the other kids in upper L, and there was just 2 of them, and you know, I tried to make it better for them because I felt bad, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as is typical in schools, you have to have a teacher's evaluation, and you know, they've gotten to be over the years major dog and pony shows, like where there's a huge rubric you have to follow, and since that time even you have to show growth in terms of like a pre-test and a post-test, and there has to be statistically significant growth. And this is everybody, even the music teacher has to do these types of evaluations. I mean, and it's so subjective too. I was lucky that most of my teaching career I had people that were friendly, and but if somebody doesn't like you, they'll fail you, right? Well, this is one of those years that here I am giving a lesson, and I had 3 lessons I was going to give them. For this hour observation that I had planned on my board. And the first lesson was long division to abstraction, because I had known they were already doing long division with the stamp game, perfect with the materials, they could do it no problem. Now let's show them how to do it without the materials. And I had 3 students selected. Well, it turned into 9 students. They all wanted this lesson. So I had it like several little tables, you know, I'm giving this lesson. And it ended up being the only lesson I gave in that hour too. I think I switched to 1 other lesson, but I didn't do the 3 that I had originally intended. But the whole time my assistant's just like, whoa, this is crazy. They were all doing it. Like after the 3rd problem, they're doing it without my help, you know? I mean, the first part I'm having them, you know, because they know this, so they're getting out the materials, they're doing it. And I'm like, so while you're doing it, this is how you write it down. Notice you laid out, you know, you had 10 tiles that you laid out, and you know, 2 groups of 5 here, so this is what you do, you know, and I'm just guiding them through it, no big deal. And they were doing it. And anyway, I thought, okay, this is great. I'm sure I got really good, scores. Yeah, I really did think that. And then a week came by and nothing, and 2 weeks went by and nothing. And then by the 3rd week, I'm like, I saw him in the hall once, and I'm like, so how did my observation go? And he's like, well, you weren't teaching, you were guiding. Like with that kind of disgust. And I'm like, well, but that's what Montessori is. We guide, you know. And I was trying to figure out what I did wrong, you know. I even showed him all the lessons that they had prior and how this just builds for this moment of abstraction where they don't need the materials anymore. And you know, I mean, you'd think he'd be impressed that there's 2nd and 3rd graders doing long division without the materials. Like, that's huge. And I give that a credit to this, you know, to the previous teacher who really prepared them for this, you know. Right. They had all these math memorization challenges at this school, and our Montessori kids were just booming, you know, they were getting more awards than everybody else because they were just motivated to use the materials and memorize things, right? So anyway, didn't matter. I couldn't convince him. Long story short, I was put on an improvement plan. Now at this point, I'm no stranger to improvement plans. I was put on one at Faith North Shaw when I was your daughter's teacher. Oh yeah, I was.
Oh my goodness.
And, you know, And I've just learned that the easiest thing is just to say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, whatever. Just do what they say so that they can get out of the classroom and I can, follow the child, right?
Right.
So that's what I did. Okay, tell me what I need to do for this improvement plan. I will improve. And I was told, it was somebody through the district who was the Montessori consultant who was not even Montessori trained, who was in charge of my improvement plan.
Montessori consultant, not Montessori trained.
Yeah.
Creating improvement plans.
Yes, that's the world of public Montessori has all kinds of interesting things in it. But I still want to support any Montessori, public, private. There's some people who are snobs about, only private or only public, but I believe in inclusivity for all different possibilities, right? Anyway, so I was told that I had to tell everybody, so it basically turned into like a center's classroom. So instead of letting kids just choose their work, and they had planners, they would choose their work, they knew that they had to get certain works done, they wanted it more controlled. So I was to announce to the kids, okay, everybody get a math work. And then 30 minutes later, tell everyone to put away the math works and time their cleanup. And then, okay, everybody get a language work. And then they put that away and then they time their, so math, language, all those things were segregated. We were timing and graphing their cleanup.
Oh my goodness.
So, how can you do mastery learning when some kids require only 20 minutes to master something, but some kids require 3 hours for a few days to master something?
And some people can clean up in 2 seconds, and some of them are still learning how to clean up.
Right? So anyway, that was my improvement plan. I did it. Now, you have to understand, they do testing 3 times a year. And I had started out with pretty high test scores for the first trimester. Second trimester testing on this improvement plan, what do you know, my test scores went down. Well, I'm not surprised, right? Another reason for me to get this person out of my room so that because not only that, they're observing me until, so I'm happy that and I don't remember exactly, but I believe it was 2 weeks, and then I was able to be off this plan and not be under the microscope anymore. And then I could go back to, my Montessori jam.
Following the children.
And surprise, surprise, we got high test scores for that last thing. And not only that, and I left naturally. I wasn't going to stick around for another year. Not only that, my son, he was telling me what medication to put my son on and just other issues like that. They were trying to tell me that my son with autism was emotionally disturbed and when the behavioral report showed that they were actually triggering his things. They would be talking, he'd have a meltdown over something and they'd be talking about him in front of the kids and everything, and in such a way that anyway, I'm just glad my son doesn't have much memory about it today. He's a well-adjusted, successful 20-year-old.
Yes.
But anyway, so I didn't stay, but I found out from my assistant. She goes, well, the principal came to me. Apparently we got really high test scores for the state testing, which doesn't surprise me, right? And he had asked her, what's our secret?
Not adhering to the improvement plan?
Yeah, not adhering to the improvement plan. I've learned
Montessori?
I have learned compromise though too. My first year here, and that was at Faith North, right? And I was your child's guide, right? They all wanted. They did not like fluorescent lights at all. So little by little, I added all these lights, incandescent lamps into the room, but it was still pretty dim.
Oh, for the children.
Yeah,
for the children. Yeah,
that's what they wanted.
I get that. I don't like it either.
And you would walk in and it would look like a cave in a way because there was only a tiny window with natural light,
but
right?
It's so peaceful.
But the kids loved it and they got more work done and everything. And at one point, my boss had said, "You need to stop doing this. You need to turn on the regular lights." I can't remember the conversation exactly, but I was really rude and I was like, well, as long as the children request this, I will do this for the children, But I've kind of outgrown that, and I'm more diplomatic, and I'll be like, okay, yes, boss.
And then when he leaves, turn the lights
But
off.
I do regret. I was very blunt. I really, I don't know. I think you come out of training and you think you can really control everything, and you can't. You have to compromise with parents. You have to compromise with teachers that you work with,
Administrators.
and you have to compromise with administrators that you work with. And everyone has different levels of that, right?
Exactly.
That are, every school culture is different. So that's one thing I've learned, that I haven't been quite as.
That is like the most amazing example of why we choose Montessori every single day.
Well, and the original principal of Meyer, this is how I fell in love with her. She was at the parent meeting, before parents had even signed up. And the parents had said, well, what if a child chooses to be outside all the time? And she goes, well, obviously that's a need, and we need to figure out why, and I'm like, she's not even Montessori trained, and she gets it, But that is my big pet peeve, in the primary classroom, you're supposed to control the environment, not the child. You're not supposed to go up to a child and be like, choose more challenging work or whatever. You're supposed to observe and give lessons, and, everyone has a different degree of control, right?
Exactly.
But I've learned that you control the environment first, and then you don't need to control children specifically.
Put that on a plaque.
You observe, you see what needs to be tweaked. Sometimes bring the kids in, that group of kids at Faith North, they saw that I'm a very disorganized person, so they came up with a really good organizational system. And the kids kept their cubbies cleaned and this and that, and I learned so much from them. Oh my gosh.
It was one of Loriana's best years of her life in school. She has lots of fond memories of it.
It was a good group of kids, and I have to give credit to the principal. She picked really good kids, even though most of them did not have Montessori training previously. They were a good group of self-starters, and it was nice. It was a nice first starter class. I got to order everything for the classroom. I sometimes regret I didn't stick around long enough, but I just wasn't sure with all the layoffs and the salary cuts, and so
Lots of changes.
I had to keep changing to where I could keep affording to support my children on a teacher's salary in Arizona, which, Arizona doesn't like to pay high salaries, so yeah.
Remind me, I have a side note for after our
Okay,
interview.
sure.
So how does Montessori vary in comparison to your own personal childhood education when you were growing up?
Okay, so when I was growing up, I had a standard traditional education, right? I mean, I went to the local public schools, I walked there. I know now that I probably had autism. I still do have autism, I just never was diagnosed as a kid. But I can remember, stimming and all these different things. I didn't learn to read until second grade. I was the kid that was doing things different, and the students would crowd around me. She's doing this. I had all these crazy ideas, I memorized the rock book, the Birds of North America. I devoured things once I learned to read. By the fourth grade, I was in the gifted program, and that was kind of fun too. But really, what made my childhood amazing, I mean, first of all, I was lucky to, even though I was kind of that spectrum-y ADHD weirdo, that the teachers were like, she's so smart, but she's so lazy, right?
And she's one of 9.
Yeah, I'm one of 9 kids, and so my childhood was awesome. We had a creek behind our house. We had complete freedom to explore and learn as long as we came back by dark, as long as we, did our chores and stuff like that. And so, I would pick a bunch of berries from the strawberry patch in our yard. Yeah, my parents composted and gardened and all that. And then I'd go and I was going to run away. I created like a hut in the backyard, and I was till the bugs got at my fruit. I had to learn a few things along the way. But I was always catching crawdads and snakes and stuff. And my brother told me later, he goes, that's what got me interested in biology. He's a biologist. But everyone in my family, we're either art geeks like my mom, because my mom's like an English major, French major, or we're science geeks like my dad, who's an engineer. And definitely that autism, that's where the autism comes from. And my dad's dad, who I love, oh my gosh, he's in heaven now, but oh my gosh, I loved him. He would make plaster casts of our face and just tell us stories about working on the dew line or the railroads or whatever, like all kinds of neat stories. But yeah, I had an awesome childhood. Like, I think that's what made me like the idea of doing Montessori. And really, that's how I taught my students before I was trained in anything. When I'm teaching those elementary students on enrichment things, I was just doing things that I did with my family. Hey, you know, let's everyone create a shop and sell things. We did that as kids, you know. Now I know it's production and exchange, and it's a huge part of the 12 to 18 program, but I was doing it since I was very little. So I'm lucky that I have that. I still remember things with my traditional education, like the teachers that would buy the purses that I would sew when I was in middle school, or the Spanish teachers, or the speech teacher. I joined speech to get over my shyness. So I can still remember those teachers, right? But my family was a huge part, I think, in making education real and alive, and they were like textbooks that I could consult, you know, if I needed, you know, how do stocks work, you know? How does all those tough questions, you know, that never came up in school that I had, you know, they were the ones that answered my questions. So yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm lucky about that.
Okay, we have to take a short break again, but we'll be back. Thank you for watching, guys. All right, we're back. Thank you guys for watching. We're going to sum this up quickly because it's warm here in Tempe, Arizona, and we're outdoors in April. But the last question I wanted to ask Liza is, what are your goals for the next 5 years?
Well, I definitely know what the next 2 to 3 years are going to bring because I signed a 2-year commitment. And I mean, and I want to stay at this school forever because I work at Creo School, and I've had the amazing gift of being able to work from Nido all the way up to like high school, sort of. I mean, the high school program is officially starting next year. And so I'm going to be working at the farm school full-time next year. This year I've been doing special education. I've called myself like a special education guide. And so I've been doing reading interventions. I've been working full-time with certain kids that need it, and then just part-time with teachers, providing resources. And then when there's no one else to do recess or breaks or whatever, I'll go and do recess or into classrooms or whatever. I've only done 1 day in the Nido, but that was awesome. But my 15-year-old student made placemats for the Nido room, so that was kind of exciting to kind of bring that together.
Now,
So
what is the farm school?
So the farm school is the school, so Montessori believed that the plan of education for children 7th grade and up was to kind of get away from society, to work on the farm, to have production and exchange where you're really participating in the economic process, to have a residential program where they're taking care of the farm and taking care of the animals and all of that, like full-time, and also taking care of your personal space and everything. Now, our program is not a residential program, but we do have a farm, we do have animals. You've toured it with me.
Yeah, check out our channel. There's 2 parts for Creo Montessori Farm School.
And the farm school has been around, I think this is its 2nd year. I think the previous year it was pretty small. And it's getting bigger and bigger. Next year there's going to be 24 students. And
next year it's going to be 9th grade, right?
Yeah, so next year starts 9th grade, so I'm really excited that I get to teach math and science and integrate them. This year I got to teach fashion design, and I hope I get to do it again to students who are interested. At the farm school, the children get to choose their own electives, and that's really exciting that there's so many different electives that they can do: music, art, engineering, stuff like that. And so
they have really cool 3D printers.
I'll also have like a science occupations class that I'll get to do as well. And I told my students with fashion design, I said, this is an engineering process. You have to, with fashion design, you have to create a design, and then you have to create a prototype of that design and make sure that it fits. You're taking a straight fabric and you're cutting it and sewing it to accommodate a curved body, which every curved body is different, So that whole process of doing that, we used a combination of patterns and then making our own design elements as needed for what the picture was in their head, which I wish I could show you, but I don't know if I have photo permission or anything for the designs that they've done. I might be able to show it off the rack. I could send you a picture. But anyway, so that's what I love to do, working with the kids. I've had this desire for a long time to do more writing, and because this whole time I've kind of created my own curriculum to go with my Montessori training, based on my knowledge as a professionally trained teacher with a degree in literacy instruction, because everything in Montessori training is a little vague, and oftentimes kids with special needs or learning differences or gifted kids, sometimes they get left behind if you're not careful. And so I've created a lot of things on my own, just going with the theme of cosmic education for grades 1 through 6, and I want to do more with it. But I also realize that the last few years of my life, I'm helping my children transition to adulthood and all of that, and so my family comes first. But eventually I want to do more of those things. I kind of help other teachers, I mentor other teachers on the side, and I want to keep doing more of that as I grow as a teacher now at the secondary level starting next year, right? So kind of a combination of growth and doing things.
Nice. Liza makes the most beautiful materials too.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
so creative. Oh
Well,
my
if you
gosh.
go on I do have a Instagram called modern_Montessorian, and that shows you. I started that when I was at Montessori Education Center for 5 years, and loved it. Just absolutely loved it. And I developed a lot of materials and other things. But you can see my journey from that to, I then worked at a special education Montessori startup school, and then I taught 8th grade. I taught 8th graders in South Phoenix high school algebra. That was what they decided we had to cover, was high school algebra, and integrated with science. So that was fun too. And then of course teaching at ASU for those few semesters was a lot of
You're
fun
going
as well.
back?
Eventually they offer me classes on occasion, and if I have time, but right now I'm really drinking in my training. I have
That's
four.
a lot. It's 2
I have
years
4 write-ups
now.
I have to do. So.
It used to be 6 weeks. It was a 6-week orientation, and now it's progressed into 2 years. So that's amazing.
I mean, and it's really good. It's really helping me integrate all my training and really see. The biggest challenge is a lot of people don't understand what follow the child means. So, sometimes they think that means let the child do whatever they want. But there's freedom within limits, and it's understanding how that, I've been at schools where obviously there were more limits than freedom.
Right.
And I've been at schools where maybe there was more freedom than limits, and both are dangerous in different ways. But I don't believe that admin micromanaging guides is the way to go.
And it takes this beautiful harmonious balance of the two.
And I'm lucky that I'm at a school now where it's like the perfect admin. I couldn't, I have no complaints about my admin. They have Montessori training. they get it, and they're supportive.
What does Creo mean?
Creo means to believe, to create. It has 3 meanings: belief, create, and I can't remember the third one. It's Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Spanish. Creer means to believe.
Nice. Inspiring.
And yeah, like if I say creo, that means I believe, or it could also mean I create.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Liza. And thank you guys all for watching. And I will be sure to link Modern Montessori in the description so you guys can check out her Instagram account. And
I
see
have
all
a
the
blog,
beautiful
but I
materials.
haven't touched it in forever.
That's okay.
But I need to add more to it. It does have one neat thing in there. But yeah.
Yeah, so check out her blog too. I'm sure it's Can they reach it via your Instagram page?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
They can. Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys again for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. And remember, always, please feel free to ask a Montessorian.
Yeah.